This is a story about the crime of the future committed now. It is a bizarre tale of how a Russian mathematical genius broke into Citibank, the world's largest bank, through cyberspace, and then sold the secret of how to do it for $100 and a couple of bottles of vodka. It is also the story of this man, locked away in Brixton Prison, who Equinox interviews for the first time. The American police are convinced he stole $10 million from the world's largest bank, diverting the missing millions all around the globe.
Good morning, I'm Bill Marlowe from SAIC, and this morning I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the side of the world not many people know about, and that is cybercrime, or if you put it in appropriate terms, people who steal or money or defraud businesses in cyberspace using the internet or bulletin boards or any type of electronic media. There's some real things that we have to set as a baseline for everybody to understand. Key point is you cannot believe that there is any law and order in cyberspace.
For the cyber criminal, banks present the most tempting target of all. Behind these fortress-like towers, banks are increasingly vulnerable to attack. More and more of their operations are becoming computerized. They're even trying to sell online home banking to the ordinary customer. Money isn't money anymore. It's numbers in a computer memory. And who's going to notice if some numbers go missing?
Let's put it in perspective. The average bank robbery, okay, I'm gonna go stick up a bank. I take a gun, I walk in, give me all your money. That typically nets the robber $1,900. It's prosecuted 82% of the time, and there's a likelihood that you're going to get shot. On the other hand, with a computer, you actually wind up seeing $250,000 taken, and it's prosecuted less than 2% of the time. Those are staggering numbers. It is safer to go by computer than it is by gun.
In the 1970s, computers were hailed as a revolution by the banking world. New technology sent money spinning around the globe in seconds. But there was a price to be paid. If money could be sent in seconds, it could be stolen just as quickly. Case 1, Security Pacific. Date, 1978. Location, Los Angeles, USA. Theft, $10.2 million.
32-year-old Stan Rifkin.
This is the man who stole $10.2 million over the phone from California's largest bank.
And used most of the money to buy diamonds. His attorney succeeded.
He was no ordinary bank robber. Stanley Mark Rifkin was a professor of social computing at the University of Southern California.
Which suggested Rifkin would not flee the country. Relatives and friends.
He was something of a misfit. His wife had just left him, tired of his eccentricity. She claimed he even tried to hypnotize her into believing she still loved him.
Rifkin gets out of jail. Joe Ramirez, NBC News, Los Angeles.
He lived in Beverly Hills. Depressed by his messy divorce and bored with life as an academic, he complained to friends that he was desperate to make a mark in history. He wanted to be the first successful computer bank robber, an ambition that was to bring him to the attention of the FBI.
The unique aspect of this crime wasn't the fact that there was a fraud perpetrated against a bank, and it really wasn't the fact that funds flowed out of a bank somewhere else, even across a state line. What was really unique about this crime was that perhaps for the first time in history, certainly in my experience and in the experience of the other agents that worked on this case, was that we had an individual carry out a scheme to defraud, and his primary accomplice in that scheme to defraud was a computer.
Rifkin was also employed as a computer consultant at the Los Angeles headquarters of California's largest bank, Security Pacific. While working in their money transfer room, he noticed security was lax, that employees would shout the daily computer passwords to each other, passwords that allowed access to the millions inside the bank. So on the 25th of October 1978, he got hold of the daily codes, something only a bank insider could do. He slipped out of the office and made a phone call. Pretending to be a client of the bank, he quoted a sequence of numbers for an account on the internal computer and started the illegal transfer of $10 million. FBI agent Robin Brown headed up the case.
Originally, he intended to send the money to Moscow to exchange it for cut polished diamonds, so that because he had another friend in the diamond business who had unknowingly told him that diamonds become a tremendous monetary device. They're not easily traceable, and that the diamonds could mask any trail that he might leave.
Rifkin flew to Switzerland and collected his diamonds. He'd committed the perfect crime of the new age. He turned computer codes, a string of numbers, into millions of dollars worth of diamonds, and the bank didn't even know a robbery had taken place. But then, his desire for recognition brought him down.
Stan told me after his arrest, he woke up and realized no one knew that he had accomplished this fantastic robbery. And at that time, Stan realized that this was done in part for ego.
Rifkin needed someone else to know he'd committed the first ever successful computer crime. He went back to America.
He looked up his attorney friend and his diamond broker friend and showed them the diamonds that he had bought, and filled, I think at one point, an ashtray. He said, "Look at these diamonds." And he was very exuberant about the robbery he had accomplished. And his friend and his attorney, of course, were aghast.
His friends went to the FBI. Robin Brown drove straight to Security Pacific's headquarters at 333 Hope Street. It was only then, 8 days after the theft, that the bank realized their millions had gone. They began to hunt for the thief. The bank always tape-recorded money transfers. They were astonished to discover the voice of their employee, Stanley Rifkin, committing the crime. We have found that recording. This is the first time the tape has been heard in public.
Okay, and the office number?
286.
286, okay. What's the code?
4739.
Okay.
The bank is Irving Trust in New York to pay amounts $10,200,000.
The tape was conclusive evidence. Rifkin was convicted and sentenced to 9 years in maximum security prison. The bank improved its security and stated publicly what Stan Rifkin did couldn't be done again.
There's a famous bank robber by the name of Willie Sutton who said that he was asked, "Why do you rob banks?" And his answer to that was, "Because that's where the money is." Banks are considered to be huge protected institutions. They have a facade that says, "I'm a bank, I have a vault, I am protected." So if you break into a bank, that's a big deal. That's cool. That's neat to break into a bank. And oh, by the way, you can pick up a few bucks on the way.
By the mid-1980s, computers had revolutionized the finance industry. The old image of bullion being carried by armed lorry was almost obsolete. Now, money traveled around the world in a split second at the touch of a keyboard. But the new technology brought new risks. Case 2, Prudential Beige. Date, 1986. Location, London. Theft, $8 million. As Big Bang fever swept the city, foreign banks poured millions into the pockets of city dealers. Giant US broker Prudential Beige was no exception. By 1986, their London office had trebled in size, with a vast investment in new technology. But this expansion carried its risks. One day, a settlement clerk noticed that $8 million of bonds had disappeared.
The reaction in this case was, first of all, one of disbelief. Let's figure out where the error occurred, because this is an error. This isn't a fraud. It can't be a fraud. We've got honest people working for us.
The police were called in. It very soon became apparent that the money had been stolen, that once again it had been the work of an insider. And soon the police had their chief suspect in these cells, Angelo Lamberty.
So we set about carrying out an interview with the staff, and there were a large number of people to interview, and eventually we arrived at an interview with Mr. Lamberty, who was very cocky and composed about the whole thing, and but during the course of the interview revealed that he had got another job and was leaving the bank. And this seemed fairly significant to us.
In fact, Lamberty had been deeply unhappy at the investment house. He didn't want to be stuck in a back office. He wanted to be a trader earning millions. His resentment was all too common at the time.
I think people at that point felt like they were invincible. And I think they were willing to take a lot more risk. Anyway, because especially if you were on the front lines as a producer, as a trader, where you're churning out enormous sums of money, I think people were willing to take a great deal of risk. And obviously the people that supported those types of people on the operations side, the back office side, first of all, some were very upset because there was just so much arrogance at that point that, in some cases they felt like slaves and they weren't sharing in the wealth.
His story was very simple. If the bank wasn't going to give him some wealth, Lamberty was going to steal it. He knew there was a computer backup system for late trading, which he could access from outside the building, using an ordinary phone line from a home computer.
In that case, it was actually an acoustic coupler, which was a low-speed link to the main computers. And in this case, it gave the individual the opportunity to be anywhere and conduct this type of transaction, whereby all they needed was the code that resided on the PC, an acoustic coupler, and the phone number.
Lamberty did not act alone. Armed with his inside knowledge, he had contacted a North London criminal gang via a friend of his, John Falinsky, a roofer. From a house 10 miles away from the bank, Lamberty was to make an illegal transfer of $8 million worth of Eurobonds from London to Geneva. The criminals would turn the bonds into cash.
On the day, Lamberty had made an excuse and absented himself from the office. Jumped on a tube train up to North London, to Falinsky's empty house, sat down at the terminal, dialed up the line and moved the stock. It was as simple as that. And then shut down the terminal, returned to the office as if he had his hospital appointment and carried on working.
This break-in, like Rifkin's 8 years earlier, needed essential information from an insider. But in this case, new telephone technology meant that the crime could be committed from a keyboard miles away. Remote access had been developed to meet the needs of banks and their customers, but the complexity of services being offered made computers increasingly vulnerable.
We reduced the exposure, but certainly we didn't eliminate it. You could never eliminate the vulnerability. The only safe computer is the one that's unplugged.
In the future, the attackers wouldn't need inside information. Banks would be vulnerable to the clever hacker working anywhere in the world. Now computer thieves can break into a bank from anywhere. They don't need to be inside the bank. They don't even need to be in the same country. They can break in from continents away. This is becoming a massive problem, although how big is almost impossible to say.
The American Bar Association says intellectual property stolen in cyberspace is $2 billion. The FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigations in the United States, says it's a $5 billion a year problem. Europol says it's a $7.8 billion a year problem. The problem is that nobody knows how to put their hands around it because nobody's really reporting this.
Case 3, Citibank. Date, 1994. Location, New York, USA. Theft, $10.7 million. Citibank are the world's largest bank. Every day, $5 trillion passes through here, their data center at 111 Wall Street. They dominate banking in America, and there are Citibank branches around the globe. But like most other banks, they are a very secretive organization.
The reasons that these businesses and governments don't want people to know is customer confidence. People are going to do business with companies and governments that they feel are protected. They're trustworthy. If they make an announcement, I've been hit, people start wondering, well, you know, what else is there? What else has been done? And other companies are standing up and saying, I've never been hit. Come do business with me.
And with the dawn of online banking, creating confidence is an essential part of Citibank's advertising campaigns.
So I get this email from my friend. Oh, all about Citibank's free PC banking. And it's all safely done on Citibank's private network.
Citibank's free PC banking. Call now to sign up. It's also available for small businesses.
So why go to the bank when the bank can come to you?
Get Citibank's free PC banking. Transfer funds, pay bills, get stock quotes, all free. Call now, 1-800-321-CITI.
But the fact that Citibank's computer systems had nearly $11 million stolen from them by an anonymous hacker is something that they are none too eager to publicize. From FBI documents, we've established there were 40 separate break-ins at the bank in a period of only 3 months, totaling $10.7 million. Money stolen from bank accounts around the world. We've pieced together this extraordinary story, a story that spans the globe. Citibank have a massive presence in Argentina. They've got many business customers, among them the stockbrokers of the Buenos Aires Stock Exchange. It's a fast-moving, volatile market where billions are traded daily. One of Citibank's biggest clients is stockbroker Invest Capital, and one morning the firm was horrified to discover that $200,000 had disappeared from its Citibank cash account overnight.
We were very, very surprised when we opened the cash management account, and all the trades that normally in our life never have a faulty problem. I mean, there were 4 wire transfers made out of that account without our consent or our authorization, and anonymously sent to 4 different destinations, I mean, to unknown counterparties. That's basically what happened. We were very, very surprised.
Citibank in New York seemed rather less surprised to hear about the break-in. They immediately repaid Invest Capital's losses. They didn't want the problem to get out.
I mean, we were shocked, and we were very worried. I mean, because we needed that money to make, in turn, our own payments. So they reacted very efficiently and professionally, and they provided us with the missing money temporarily until they sorted out what was going on. And I mean, we started to understand that they knew that there was something going on, because when Citibank Buenos Aires talked with Citibank New York, I mean, they were already on the trace of these guys.
In fact, Roberto Barbosa's company in Argentina was not the only one to have been robbed. Over the past year, 18 other Citibank accounts had been targeted. The first raid took place in June '94. Over $140,000 was illegally transferred from the Philippine National Bank in Hong Kong. As the months passed, the list of victims got longer, and the total stolen from the bank mounted. $500,000, $800,000, $1.5 million, $2.5 million. By the raid on Argentina, the total stolen was dangerously close to $5 million. It seemed no one was safe from the anonymous cyber criminal. Citibank were in a state of panic. Somebody, somewhere, was hacking into their computer security system, using international phone lines. But they couldn't announce this publicly. Terrified of a loss of customer confidence, Citibank could say nothing while the hacks continued. They still refused to discuss the details of the crisis. But we've discovered that in secrecy they assembled a war room at 111 Wall Street to track the missing millions. From their hideaway in New York, the Citibank experts watched as an alarming picture emerged. The stolen money was being sent around the globe. Finland, Russia, Israel, Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and even the USA. The war room had to move fast. They had to discover where the stolen money had gone and get there before it was withdrawn. San Francisco was to be the first breakthrough. Citibank discovered that all the money stolen from Invest Capital in Argentina was transferred thousands of miles to California. The money was sent to bank accounts in the names of a Russian emigre couple, Evgeny and Ekaterina Korolkov. But less than half the money in their account at Wells Fargo had been withdrawn. The FBI moved fast. Agents staked out the bank. Four days later, Mrs. Korolkov was arrested, trying to make another withdrawal from the account. But she refused to talk about who was behind the operation. Her husband Evgeny had already fled to Russia. However, the implications were clear. Citibank was being targeted by a highly organized criminal gang with money collectors, known as mules, in place all around the globe. Citibank then decided that they had to take a chance. They needed to catch another mule, and quickly. The war room watched every transfer intently, trying to spot any fraud. They homed in on the likely targets. Latin America was being hit regularly. They looked for big, unusual transfers, but there was no sure way of knowing. They'd decided that when the next illegal transfer was made, they would allow it to go through and try and catch the mule who went to collect the money. It was a big gamble. They might not react in time. Then it happened. $3 million crossed the Atlantic from Colombia to Holland to a series of bank accounts in Rotterdam. The war room moved fast. The Dutch police were alerted, and this man was arrested trying to withdraw the cash. His name was Vladimir Voronin.
I just came to the bank, had a seat, took a coffee, and Dutch police arrived and arrested me. That's it.
Voronin admitted being part of a Russian gang based here in St. Petersburg, the place where the search was to move next. He was actually a key player. It turned out Voronin was in charge of the whole money-collecting operation, recruiting all the mules. The bank's luck was in. Voronin was prepared to talk. He explained his massive debts had put him in the power of the Russian mafia.
They say, hey, you know, you got a problem, you know, financial problem. We can help you. I said, okay, how you can help me? He said, you know, we got some connection with American bank, we can make transaction, but we don't know, we don't want to, you know, show up in a light, because if you can find some people who can open account in the bank and they get the money, okay, you just tell us and we're gonna do it. You can get some percentage of it. Okay?
Voronin was prepared to tell all he knew, but his testimony did not include the crucial information that the FBI and the bank were after. Who was the hacker and where was he operating from? In a state of crisis, Citibank turned to security expert Bill Marlow.
In fact, when we traced and trapped a number of these cyber criminals, what they've actually done is they've wrapped their trail 3 times around the globe through 11 different phone systems to cover their trails. This is virtual space. I can do this from any point on the globe. As long as I've got a laptop, I can literally do this from any point on the globe.
With the help of digital telephone exchanges, the war room traced the calls back to Russia, to St. Petersburg, confirming what Voronin had told them. But in trying to work out the exact location of the telephone, the war room hit a dead end. The telephone exchange in St. Petersburg is an old-fashioned analog system.
When an old-style step-by-step or crossbar mechanical exchange is called, we use special equipment called number identification equipment. In this case, it is only possible to trace a call while the line is still open. In other words, as long as the caller does not hang up. If these conditions are met, then it is possible to trace the origin of the call by observing the positions of the various switches. This can be done by the exchange operators, but once the line is no longer open, it then becomes impossible to trace the call.
After weeks of listening to thousands of international phone calls, the bank had a lucky break. Not only did they spot an unauthorized transfer of money taking place, but the hacker stayed on the line long enough for his telephone number to be traced. It was the first vital clue as to the hacker's location. The call came from this building, in a rundown area of St. Petersburg. The phone line was in this office, the headquarters of a small trading company, A.O. Saturn. The Russian police were brought in one of their first ever operations involving computers. They kept the A.O. Saturn offices under constant surveillance.
We had to find out about the computer qualifications of these people, how good they were, to get the money from the bank. We had to study inter-country communications, the phone calls they were making to different countries of the world. We had to study their personal and business links between themselves and other companies. we had to get more information about the people themselves and find out why they were involved in these crimes.
But their surveillance did not reveal the crucial information. They established that many people used the computer, but they didn't know which of them had been using it to make the illegal transfers.
It was difficult for witnesses to explain what they have seen. Say you're an office cleaner. You don't know what's going on at a computer. If they did know about computers, they explained it in such a way that it is difficult for me, as an ordinary policeman, to understand.
With the investigation deadlocked in Russia, in America the investigators had a breakthrough. Mrs. Korolkov had been tried and was about to be sentenced. She wanted to cut a deal. She admitted her husband Evgeny had worked at AO Saturn as a driver. The FBI contacted him in Russia. They suggested he play ball. They'd treat his wife leniently if he would give them the name of the hacker. Korolkov gave them the name they wanted. He claimed that the Citibank robber was a 26-year-old computer programmer called Vladimir Levin. The FBI demanded evidence of his allegation and persuaded Korolkov to take part in a wiretapped phone conversation with Levin. We have obtained transcripts of that conversation. Levin is seemingly aware that Korolkov is playing a double role and insists several times that the phone is being bugged. The call itself was inconclusive, but back in the USA it was enough for the FBI. The authorities started proceedings against Levin. The reason for the next event is unclear or possibly even disputed. Within 2 weeks, Levin flew to London, according to him on his way to a computer fair in Germany, but he got no further than Stansted Airport. As he got off the plane, he was arrested and taken here to Brixton Prison, accused of stealing $10.7 million from the USA, a country he'd never visited in his life. Inside Brixton Prison is the man accused by the US authorities of stealing nearly $11 million from the world's largest bank. The FBI alleges that he is the Russian mastermind who broke the bank in New York, stealing from Latin American clients and laundering the missing millions around the world.
Yeah, because I need to chat about extradition.
Vladimir Levin has never spoken publicly before.
Yeah, very good.
He is fighting extradition to America, where he faces charges of bank theft and wire fraud. If convicted, he could be in US jails for 65 years. He agreed to give us an exclusive interview on the condition that Louis Freeman, his American lawyer, was present. Freeman will handle Levin's case if he is extradited to America.
Okay, so you said you worked as a computer programmer.
He was to monitor the interview, along with his British counterpart, who is fighting the extradition, barrister Alan Jones, QC.
If you want to go in English, that's fine.
No, we speak in Russian.
Okay, fine.
We started by asking Levin what his job had actually been.
Значит, это, в принципе, даже связано, наверное, с перестройкой.
I should say that computers arrived to the Soviet Union, to the then Soviet Union, with perestroika.
Один из символов, наверное.
And I would even say that they were one of the symbols of the perestroika.
Бухгалтерские программы для различных предприятий города.
And I was writing accounting programs, and they were not simple, they were quite complicated programs. They were designed to calculate the amount of wages for the new companies of modern Russia.
Vladimir Levin was only 26 years old when he was arrested. He's a graduate of the celebrated Leningrad Technical Institute, where he'd studied biotechnology. He was one of very few students to earn a Red Star for his degree. But in the new world of St. Petersburg, first-class degrees counted for nothing.
I was 21 years old. The salary at the institute that I was receiving was very low. It was only 45 rubles, and I was too ashamed to ask for money from my parents. I was old enough to do my own work, so I decided that I could write software, and that's what I was doing. Of course, I enjoyed what I was doing. I think there are very few people who do this work without enjoying it.
But Korolkov, his colleague at AO Saturn, alleges that Levin's work went far beyond company accounts. In this affidavit to the FBI, he says that Levin was the controller of the operation against the bank.
Near midnight, on the evening of August the 23rd, 1994, I was at the office of Saturn in St. Petersburg with Levin and another man. Utilizing two computers, Levin proceeded to execute transfers to certain accounts in the Netherlands, Finland, and Germany.
It is on the basis of this man's evidence alone that Levin was arrested.
Там нельзя сказать, что это вот было на этой стадии. Значит, полиция, английская полиция сказала...
What actually happened then? I was told by a police officer that I have stolen $10 million from America, and I was very surprised, to say the least astonished.
Неожиданность. Я подумал, что это какая-то ошибка. Но английский адвокат, который...
And then my solicitor told me that I can be kept in prison for 60 days. And during this time, the American officials, they have to prove that I actually committed this crime.
In those 60 days, the FBI were desperate to find evidence directly linking Levin to the crime. They contacted the Russian police in St. Petersburg. Their observation of AO Saturn's office was proving fruitless. So the special branch raided the offices of the company. This is their video record of what they claim to have found. The computers, which they say siphoned millions from the West. The guns, bought by the Russian mafia with the missing millions. And the passport of the man they accuse of masterminding the whole scheme, a 26-year-old computer programmer, Vladimir Levin. We asked Levin whether he was guilty of this crime.
It is not the time to answer this question. I will have to answer it in America, in front of a jury.
I'm hearing your defense now, but they don't tell you the detail of their case. They only tell you
You can
what
chime in, Alan, but I just think he's got to say, I'm not guilty. Take your shoe off and bang it on the table.
Okay.
Ну, первое, я скажу так. Те обвинения, которые...
From the papers that I saw and accusations that I read, I could say that I'm not guilty whatsoever. If I am extradited to America, of course I may be put on trial, but all I can say is that I am not guilty, and this is total rubbish.
То, что там написано, это нонсенс и нелепица. Ну, не знаю, даже адвокат сказал, что я не похож на человека, у которого есть деньги.
Even my solicitor said that you don't look like a person who has money.
Especially $10 million.
But according to Korolkov's affidavit to the FBI, Levin wasn't just the computer programmer. He was running the operation. Korolkov claimed,
Levin told me he was able to monitor by computer the accounts of companies using the money transfer system. He would transfer money only from accounts of companies that were engaging in such large transactions that the unauthorized transfer would not be noticed immediately. And he would withdraw the money promptly.
The evidence against you rests on the testimony of one man, Evgeny Korolkov. What is your response to that testimony?
2 words. It's not true.
Whether Levin is or is not the Russian mafia hacker at AO Saturn is in fact only half the story. The AO Saturn hacker was not the first person here in St. Petersburg to break into Citibank's computers. Whoever committed the crime relied on the genius of this man, the very first person to break into Citibank. He's a mathematical wizard, university educated, but like so many graduates in modern Russia, he's unemployed. Known only as Megazord, his obsession with computers led him to hacking. He's not in it for the money, but his skills could be very valuable to the mafia. He will not reveal his true identity for fear of threats to his life.
I don't want to be recognized in the street. I don't want people to think I've got money, because I haven't. I don't make any money from this, and I don't ever want to. It's an intellectual challenge, a chess game. I don't want to be pestered with requests from various criminal organizations, especially not from those who have very little understanding of what I do. Nor do I want anyone close to me to be put in danger.
For years, Megazord had been cracking the secrets of the West. Citibank was his biggest challenge. He broke into Citibank's vast network of VAX computers, some of the most sophisticated in the world, using the most basic of technology. A computer he'd bought for $10 and a modem he'd got for a bottle of vodka. The price of access to the billions of dollars of the West.
The computer to which I was connected belonged to a man who had extensive control over the network's administration. He had access to a great deal of information. He didn't know I was on his system for 3 whole months, despite the fact that I was starting up his programs and looking through his archives almost every night. I want to show you the person's telephone number, the system administrator.
For legal reasons, we have obscured the name and telephone number of the Citibank executive whose computer he claims he broke into. Megazord penetrated some of Citibank's most secret and protected data systems, privileged bank accounts, the private files of senior employees. He was able to monitor the billions circling the cash management system. He could slip in and out of the network unnoticed.
I'll just say that I simply changed the network's configuration in order to gain access to the system without having to go through too many procedures.
Megazord broke into the bank in 1993. 6 months later, all his hard-won knowledge fell into less benign hands. One night, one of his fellow hackers went for a drink. Drunk and depressed, he sold the secrets of how to break into Citibank. The price, $100 and a couple of bottles of vodka. The buyers, the Russian mafia. At AO Saturn, in the autumn of 1994, the mafia began to make good use of Megazord's secrets. Citibank's problems began in earnest. As the money disappeared, so executives realized that the security of the bank had been compromised. Desperate for a technical fix, they turned to Silicon Valley's security experts.
I personally received a phone call from an officer of the bank saying, how fast could you secure certain entities within Citibank? And we took all of our available resources and made it happen.
Citibank had long relied on a system of static passwords. They never changed. Using the new systems of encryption, Brady installed a dynamic, ever-changing password.
Instead of keying in a fixed password, what will happen, I'll turn on this little device, and it has a little display window here. It's going to ask me to enter a PIN, only something I know, almost like a fixed password, only it's not being transmitted. It's only going into the card. So I key in something that I know, and the next thing I see is a dynamic password. As soon as it recognizes that that is the correct PIN, it will automatically generate a one-time password. The odds are at least 11 million to 1 of somebody guessing that password at the very least, especially the way, and the way Citicorp has got it set up, the odds are a lot more than that.
The dynamic password certainly improves Citibank's security, but it does not completely solve the problem. Megazord didn't crack any passwords. He found a route into Citibank that bypassed all the bank's defenses, an open modem. Citibank computers rely on modems to talk down telephone lines to other banks' computers, just like any domestic PC. This is their Achilles heel.
The most common mistake thing is they typically have hundreds, if not thousands, of open modems in their systems. That's probably the #1 technical thing we find, are these open modems that give direct access. You don't even have to go through their switches or anything. You can get direct access to systems by finding the right modem.
Citibank will not discuss this. They refused our request for an interview. Instead, they provided a written statement. In it, they claim Levin attempted to steal $10.7 million, but only $400,000 was actually withdrawn. That during the crisis, client funds were never at risk. That nevertheless, they have improved their security systems, and that they take any fraud against the bank seriously. Whether the full truth will ever emerge about this extraordinary robbery is doubtful. The bank has no desire to wash their dirty linen in public. And in St. Petersburg, the Russian mafia are equally expert at covering their tracks. Meanwhile, nearly 24 months after his arrest, Levin still sits in Brixton Prison, fighting off extradition to the USA. The House of Lords will hear his case in the spring. And Megazord is still hacking the secrets of the banks from his base in a squat in St. Petersburg. But he may not be the only one who continues to hack. Brighton Beach, off the coast of New York, is home to a massive Russian émigré population. Vladimir Voronin now lives here. After his arrest in Holland, he was extradited to the USA. The gang's money launderer is under no illusions.
Every Russian programmer is potential hacker because, you know, if life puts him in a situation when he working and he can't get his salary, you have to do something to get your money.
Would it surprise you to hear that Citibank was still being hacked, even today?
No. I probably could be surprised if it didn't happen, you know. I think about next, some transactions.
Why wouldn't you be surprised?
Because I don't think actually that Levin is, it's head of this operation. Nobody's safe.
If Levin wasn't the head of this operation, then whoever was is still at large. And the banks of the West are still under threat.